When hockey fans talk about the greatest goal scorers of all time, the same names always come up. Wayne Gretzky, Alex Ovechkin, Gordie Howe, Mike Bossy. But there's one name that almost nobody mentions anymore. A man who dominated the NHL before people even had a television. A player who led the league in goals 5 different times. A goal scorer so unstoppable that in his prime he averaged nearly a goal a game in the dead puck era of the 1930s. And somehow, nobody talks about him. His name? Charlie Conacher. Today we're diving into the forgotten dominance, the tragic career decline, and lasting legacy of one of the greatest snipers the sport of hockey has ever seen. To understand Charlie Conacher, you need to understand the NHL that he played in. This wasn't the modern NHL with composite sticks, charter flights, and power play systems designed by video coaches. This was brutal, chaotic hockey. Players rode trains, equipment barely protected them, goalies didn't even wear masks. And scoring was hard. Many people recognize the lowest scoring era in NHL history as the dead puck era of the late 90s, early 2000s. But the lowest scoring time in NHL history was actually the late 20s and 30s. And that's precisely the era that Charlie Conacher played in. Aside from the low goal scoring, defensemen could practically mug a goal scorer without any consequence. And yet, Charlie Conacher scored like a man from a different era completely. At 6'1" and over 200 pounds, Charlie Conacher stood tall among his peers. The big bomber made all players around him look very small. And arguably the league's first true power forward looked like he was dropped into the league 50 years early. He had strength, reach, hands, but most importantly, he had one of the best slap shots, and he did it with a wooden stick. Charlie Conacher became the centerpiece to one of the NHL's first truly dominant power lines, the kid line for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Skating alongside Joe Primo and Busher Jackson, this trio transformed the Maple Leafs into an absolute powerhouse. And despite the nickname, these guys weren't flashy like they were playing on pond hockey. They were terrifying. Primo was the elite playmaker, Jackson brought speed and chaos, and Conacher, he finished everything. A player who could overpower defenders and beat goalies clean from a distance. In 1931, Charlie Conacher exploded for 31 goals in just 38 games. This was a 44-game season back then. And that doesn't sound outrageous today, but in context, it was absolutely absurd. He was head and shoulders above his teammates, and it wasn't a fluke. He kept on doing it. Charlie Conacher led the NHL in goals 5 times. 5. And yet modern fans probably couldn't tell you a single thing about him. And here's a crazy part. He accomplished this before the NHL even expanded, meaning all of the talent was concentrated into a small number of teams. There were no weak expansion clubs, no watered down rosters. Every night was absolutely brutal, and Conacher still dominated anyways. And he did everything in an era where goals were disappearing around the league. In fact, the NHL got so defensive during the 30s, they tried multiple rule changes in order to drive offense, but Charlie Conacher kept scoring in spite of it. Imagine if a player dominated the league over multiple seasons, but somehow nobody talks about him because it happened before television. That's basically what happened with Charlie Conacher. So why isn't Charlie Conacher remembered in the same light as other elite goal scorers in NHL history? There's a few reasons, and honestly, none of them are fair. The first is timing. He played hockey before it became a true mass media sport. There's very little surviving footage of when Charlie Conacher played. In fact, most fans have never seen him play at all. And in sports history, visibility matters a lot. If there's no highlight package, no iconic television moments, no viral clips, players simply fade. Second, he played in the shadow of larger hockey legends at the time. In Toronto alone, players like Sillaps and Ted Kennedy are more synonymous with fans at that time. And league-wide, the rise of Howie Morenz and later Maurice the Rocket Richard, Gordie Howe, etc. really take over fans' memories. Conacher simply became trapped between eras. And third, his career ended before people realize. And that's the big one. Charlie Conacher's prime was brilliant. Arguably the greatest prime in NHL history. He led the league in goal scoring 5 out of 6 years. He had 2 point titles to go along with that, but it didn't last nearly long enough. In 1936, he suffered a serious injury. In today's NHL, players get surgeries, specialized treatment, recovery programs, and cutting-edge treatments. But back then, you basically just hoped for the best. And for a goal scorer whose shot was his greatest weapon, this injury was devastating. His production began to fall, his dominance dissipated, and suddenly the league just moved on. This is one of the cruelest realities in sports history, the "what have you done for me lately" scenario. If your decline comes early, people begin to question, well, were you really that great to begin with? But when you look at Conacher's peak, it stands up to anyone. Seriously. If modern analytics existed in the 1930s, Conacher probably looked like an absolute monster. Era-adjusted scoring? Elite. Relative dominance? Elite. Goal scoring consistency in his prime? Elite. And unlike many of the pure goal scorers in the 30s, he brought the physical dominance too. He wasn't just picking corners, he was absolutely punishing his defenders. And when it comes to the actual numbers, this is when it gets really interesting. In 328 games with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Conacher scored 200 goals and 324 points. Over his first 7 healthy seasons, Charlie scored 190 of Toronto's 965 goals. That accounts for 19.6 of the entire team's goal production over that time. 1 out of every 5 goals scored for Toronto over those 7 years were put in by Charlie Conacher. And when it comes to era-adjusted statistics, this is where it's going to absolutely blow your mind. There's a mathematical formula that makes things more even for players playing from different eras. So in those same 328 games with Toronto, Charlie Conacher scored 353 goals and 664 points. And again, Conacher did this in the toughest goal-scoring era of all time. Not in the high-flying 1980s, not in the expansion-heavy 1970s, but in the 1930s. This guy was basically a modern scoring superstar under prehistoric offensive conditions. If Charlie Conacher had access to the same modern equipment, modern training, modern rules, and modern offensive systems, he'd probably be an absolute monster. Charlie Conacher would become the first player in NHL history to lead the league in goals 5 times. He'd also be the first player in NHL history to lead the league in points in back-to-back seasons. And when it comes to his own team's history, he still ranks 3rd among right wings in points per game. He is one of only 6 Maple Leafs to lead the league in goals, and he's one of only 3 to do it more than once. He's one of only 4 Maple Leafs to lead the league in points, and he's the only one in Toronto Maple Leafs history to lead the league in points more than once. So Charlie Conacher eventually made it to the Hall of Fame, but even there he still seems forgotten. He is almost never mentioned in greatest goal scorer debates. He is rarely ever spoken about in mainstream hockey documentaries. And I have never heard a younger fan mention him or even recognize him by name. But hopefully that's going to start to change. Because hockey history has entered a new era. Fans care about context. Fans care about adjusted statistics. And when you apply that lens to Charlie Conacher, you realize something very important. He wasn't just a player from the good old days. He was one of the most dominant, pure goal scorers of all time. Charlie Conacher's career burned bright and fast. A nightmare for goaltenders. A 5-time goal-scoring king. And maybe the greatest forgotten goal scorer the NHL has ever seen. Because sometimes history remembers the loudest legends. And it simply leaves behind players that were every bit as dominant. Charlie Conacher deserves to be remembered among the greatest snipers in NHL history. Not just as a footnote, but as one of the original scoring superstars in the NHL. Was Charlie Conacher the most underrated goal scorer in NHL history? Let me know in the comments. And if you love this content, like, subscribe, share it, let people know I exist. If you love hockey history, I'm your guy.